Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today, we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Our first story today comes to us from NoPush5003. Oh, you mean right now? Okay, let's jump right in. Let me, 25 male, introduce you to the key players in this story. First, we have my dog. She is a service animal and as a result, is very well trained. Up next, my annoying and petty neighbors. I live in a small duplex with an even smaller front yard that isn't fenced in. The only thing separating the duplex and the neighbor's house is a very narrow driveway. It's important to note that when I refer to the neighbors, I am not referring to the residents of the connecting unit of the duplex, but the owners of the house a driveway over. My neighbors have a history of annoying behavior. For starters, they are extremely socially awkward. They watch over us like hawks, have never been able to hold a conversation with us despite us being friendly and trying, and are some of the most passive-aggressive people on earth. Maybe it's because we're college-aged and they have something against the Utes, but whatever the reason, they have it out for us. The neighbors have called our landlords to tell them that we are partying at all hours of the night. The family, with infants in the connecting unit, the unit that shares a wall with us, have never once complained. When the landlord asked them about these complaints, they always denied it. For reference, aside from me, none of the other residents of the house even drink. I drink on occasion, once every few months, but never at the house out of respect for the sober people. The neighbors called the city over the course of several months and got one side of the street turned into a no parking zone because we have 4 cars in total, one for each person that lives in our unit, and have to park on the street. This obstructed their view. As a result, we started parking in front of their house on the legal side of the street. One day, while we were gone, they moved their truck from their driveway that has ample parking to the street to block us from parking there. Their truck didn't move for 6 months. Anytime my dog goes number 2 in the yard and it sits for more than a few hours, they call the landlord to report it. Because of my disability, I can't always get to it immediately. My landlord understands this and understands how the neighbors are. So, she had stopped saying anything aside from laughing with me about how ridiculous and annoying these people are. This is just a short list of my grievances with our neighbors. I could go on, but by now, you get the point. Well, yesterday morning, I let my dog out as per usual. I was in my underwear, which are thin and tight-fitting, as I had just rolled out of bed. Let's just say that they don't hide much of anything. I'm standing in the doorway where my neighbor's house is blocked from my view. As my dog is sniffing around in our yard, I look down at my phone. A few seconds later, I hear our neighbor, the wife, shout, "No, don't do that here. Get out of our yard, stop that," in a very panicked voice. Turns out, they were all sitting outside. By the time the neighbor had shouted, it was too late to call my dog back over. She was in the process of gifting them a big present. I shout, "Hey, I'm sorry about that. I'll come get it, give me a minute," and call my dog back inside. Dead silence. About 15 seconds go by. I was on my way to my room to throw some pants and a shirt on when I hear a muffled shout from the husband, "Come pick this up right now." I chuckled to myself and shouted, "Okay," with a huge grin on my face. I knew what I had to do. I dropped the pants that I had grabbed. I turned right around, picked up a doggy bag by the door, and made my way out of the door and into view of the husband, who is standing cross-armed near the pile of poop with a rude expression and posture, the wife and the daughter. Watching the look of anger turn into shock was so satisfying. He was truly speechless, as was the rest of the family. I'm just happy to have a story I can finally share on here. I also think the family is LDS Mormon, so that is probably the most graphic display of private bits they have ever seen. At least in the non-marital sense. OP, you really need to check with your city, because if a vehicle hasn't moved for over 6 months and it's parked on city property, you can likely get it towed for being abandoned. I do have to somewhat look at this from the other side though, Because if OP's sending their dog out to go to the washroom and it's not leashed or attached to anything, then that's kinda OP's problem that it's gone and crapped in somebody else's lawn. Unless you have a completely enclosed area outside that your dog can go to the washroom in, it should be leashed or attached to something.
Do me a quick favor and take a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're actually not subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories.
This next story comes to us from Snort Giggles. You want to make things fair? I'll show you fair. Let's jump right in. A couple of weeks ago, my kids and their neighbors decided to have a bake sale. We live in a tourist area with high foot traffic, and the kids make a killing. I tell the kids I ought to charge them for the labor. I said I'd help bake, and ingredients, so they learn the concept of net gains. But instead, I'll donate to their cause, and just to bring me back the money I lent them to make change. I love seeing the kids be entrepreneurial, work so hard, and get so excited at their success. After a couple of hours, the neighbor's son decides he's bored and wants to go home. So he tells my kid, when you're done, come by and deliver half the money. Mine says, hey, that's not fair. If you're leaving, we should split the money now. Mind you, the bulk of their sales was my baking. Neighbor kid gets super pissed, but mine sticks to their guns. They split the money, and the kid leaves in a huff. Mine comes in a few hours later, having lugged home all the gear and cleaned up, annoyed that the neighbor kid got annoyed at them. Then I get a knock on the door. It's the neighbor's mom, with the kid who is still pouting. Mom's holding a receipt. Mom explains that they purchased a bunch of stuff for the bake sale. It cost a lot of money, and it's not fair that my kid is making money off their stuff, and that they should be compensated for what they purchased. The receipt lists a bunch of items I immediately see they didn't use, like 2 boxes of cereal when they used 1, napkins that I'd ended up providing, but whatever. And never mind that her son went home early and left mine to clean up. And never mind that I'd been churning out batches of cookies all morning. I'm irked they've taken what was a fun, cheerful day of kids making money hand over fist and shown up at my door making me engage in a super awkward conversation because they assume their kid can't be wrong. So I say, of course, and fetch my receipts. I sit down and, in front of them and out loud, calculate the cost of lemonade and cups used. I calculate the cost of flour, sugar, chocolate chips, vanilla, and butter per batch of cookies, multiplied by the number of batches made. I toss in the baking soda for free, so generous. I even subtract the value of leftover cookies. Did I mention I made a lot of cookies? The neighbor kid has to fork over $23. They got pretty quiet all of a sudden. I thanked the lady for making sure things were fair and offered her a plate of cookies to take home. She declined. The end. So this is a parent that wasn't taking the whole situation into consideration, because if they did, they would have realized they weren't the only people there. They weren't the only people that supplied items to this sale. It does sound like the apple isn't falling far from the tree though, because the kid still wanted half of everything, even though they were leaving partway through. That kinda rings true with exactly what the parent was trying to do in this case as well. OP, one more thing to consider though, now that you've made your point, if your kid ever tries to sell anything outside of your house again, make sure you're properly permitted, because that neighbor could very likely hold a grudge, and they might want to do anything possible to get you shut down. This next story comes to us from 5 Frog Margin. Why is there pizza sauce smeared all over the walls? The bosses wondered to themselves. Let's jump right in. 20 years back, I worked on a tugboat sailing the Great Lakes. This was a really crappy company, and they'd more or less exhausted very available mariner living on the Great Lakes, so nobody on the lakes would even apply to work there anymore. As a result, I, Tennessee Kentucky river trash deckhand, got hired on. From the get-go, it was an uphill battle. My hard work ethic and easygoing nature were overshadowed by my southern accent and inexperience with big cities. Hick was one of the nicer terms thrown my way in those 6 months. But the money was amazing, and I learned to eat plenty of crap as I really wanted the job. After about 4 to 5 months, I began to get a bigger picture of the dynamic and was vastly more confident in my abilities. At this point, I was unconsciously doing most, if not all, of the deckhand's work on board. One way I got screwed was galley kitchen cleanup. One of the deckhands got galley cleanup in the morning, one got it at night. Naturally, as the FNG, effing new guy, I always seem to get stuck with nighttime galley cleanup. AM cleanup was a little more than tossing dishes in the washer and making coffee. Nighttime cleanup was the culmination of an entire day's worth of buildup. Easily 45 to 60 minutes worth of work. Enter the annual shipyard period, and this is where our tale begins. We pulled into Sturgeon Bay, population 8,900, around dusk, as we had a 3-week shipyard period scheduled. Now, this company was death on drinking, instant firing. Of course, because we all had no loading or unloading the next day, we all went out to some local bar that night. My years of coal barge experience taught me grab a few drinks, then get back to the boat. We got a job in a few hours. So after a half dozen buds, I walked back to the boat to go to sleep. Since I was a nice guy, always trying to help out my crew no matter what they do to me, I decided to cook them a couple pizzas. I tossed a couple tombstones in the oven, set cook, smoked a butt or two, then pulled them out. I placed them on the counter with a note, pizzas on the stove, clean up your mess, put dishes in washer when you're done. Maybe it was the demanding tone in my orders, but my note 100% set them off. I woke up to literally pizza smeared across every cabinet and a rough FU in pizza font on the whiteboard. I woke up at 0600 to this mess. Since it was morning cleanup, I figured it was not my responsibility. I'd been getting up at 0600 1 hour before the crew and making coffee for 2 months, and I suspect they were used to it. This time, the bigwigs from the office were in town, shipyard remember, and had let the captain know they would be on board in the AM, and so they were. I was in the galley, sipping my coffee, when 3 of the bigwigs came down the stairs. I politely asked if anyone wanted coffee. They all said yes, former sailors, and sat in the galley staring at the Pizza Picasso artwork decorating the bulkheads, walls, waiting for the captain apparently. After 10 to 15 minutes, the captain came down. He had that been drinking all night vibe to him and was promptly horrified at the state of the galley. Of course, he immediately tried to show off by raging against me and the state of the galley. I reminded him that I was night cleanup, not AM cleanup. The more he tried to pin this on me, the worse he looked. It finally culminated in him trying to hammer me. I know you have night cleanup, but couldn't you have at least wiped down the cabinets? I'd had an hour to practice my answer. When we left Toledo last week and I asked you for help cleaning the galley after the mess the longshoremen left, you told me I volunteered for night cleanup, so it's my job, period. Well, now it's AM cleanup, and other deckhand has cleanup. He doubled down and ordered me to clean the galley to save face, but it was just digging a deeper hole. Best of all, my shipmates couldn't resist bragging about the stupid drunk crap they'd done that night. I called the company's 1-800 number, used a variety of accents, and complained about what they'd been doing in Sturgeon Bay. Some of the complaints I made lifted straight from their stories from that night. 1. Threw their empties at the bar's Billy Bassmouth trophy. 2. Tried to take down 2 of the bar's 5 mounted deer heads. 3. Walked behind the bar to grab a bottle of Jägermeister to pour free shots for everyone. 4. After getting kicked out, they weren't, kicking the side of a pickup parked in front. 5. Putting empties in several mailboxes between the bar and the shipyard. 6. Knocking a bass-shaped mailbox off of its mount. All of which they bragged about loudly. Long story short, 1 officer and a deckhand got fired. The captain had Sturgeon Bay hanging over his head as long as I worked there, 7 years. And the office never effed with me, not once. Some people really think they're in a position of power and can tell other people what to do with absolutely no consequences. They think that their status or their rank equals dominance over other people, that they're above other people. This can even cloud their ability to see reason, which is what we had in this case here. The last part I want to touch on in this one though is who desecrates pizza. I mean, come on, it's pizza. This next story comes to us from Wombat929. Nope, the boss isn't here. Mini malicious compliance in the box office. Let's jump right in. When I was in high school mid-90s, I worked at a movie theater. When I was working box office, it was also my job to answer the phone. Manager managed multiple branches of the theater, so he often left during the day. One day, regional manager who was good friends with manager called, and I said I'm not sure if manager was there. I checked and manager was in, so I transferred the call. After a few minutes, manager transferred regional manager back to me so he could scold me. At the time, it felt like yelling, but I was a timid teen, that I should always know if my manager is in or not. As an adult, I now recognize that 1. Manager should have corrected this, rather than having a corporate bigwig scold a teenager. 2. I should have been trained to see if he's available, so I could take a message if he wasn't. But at the time, I was just really irritated to get scolded by regional manager over something I couldn't control. So from then on, whenever regional manager called, he would say, "Hi OP, is manager in?" He'd really hit that question, highlighting that I should know. I think he only did this to me as it seemed like his entire impression of me was as a dumb kid who didn't know if the manager was there. So with just a hint of goody two-shoes maliciousness, unless I was absolutely sure that the manager was there, I usually told regional manager that manager had stepped out and asked to take a message. It often turned out that manager was there when regional manager called, so I could have connected them. But since I'd been told how dire it was to be uncertain, I never again expressed any doubt about whether manager was in or not. I'd like to say that the story had some kind of gratifying button, but my malicious compliance mainly resulted in regional manager being slightly inconvenienced, and manager having to return calls he could have just taken. They both got fired sometime later in a midnight sweep that was rumored to be embezzlement related, but who knows if that's the truth? I sure don't. In retrospect, I realize now that regional manager taught me the difference between Gnostic and agnostic. I was usually agnostic on the issue of my manager's presence upstairs. You know, working in a theater, it can be understandable that you wouldn't know whether your manager is in the building or not. There's a lot of people moving around in a place like that, and unless it's your job to actually know that, well, you just won't know that. So yes, OP should have been better trained. Anytime they got a call asking where the manager was, they should have said, "Let me check for you," and put them on hold for a moment to go see if the manager was there. Obviously, that's not how OP was trained, but that shouldn't fall back on OP, that should fall back on the manager themselves. Now, in the comment section for this one, there was a hilarious answer here that they say OP should have used. It's from the user CoderJoe1, and it says, the correct answer is, yes, he's here, but he skipped his bran muffin this morning after having an argument with his wife about what her mother said yesterday, and is currently contemplating his existence in the men's room. Second stall from the end, the one with the better graffiti, and the door that doesn't close exactly right unless you lift it as you close it. Personally, I think his mother-in-law is wrong when she said working as a movie theater manager is wasting his life. Would you like to leave a message for him?
Check out all 4 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.